Hi everyone. So these are the typical ingredients that I include in my pasta, but you are free to make this your own and toss in whatever you prefer by means of vegetables and greens and lentils and different herbs and spices. So today I'm just going to have these bell peppers, Roma tomatoes, chopped mustard greens, tomato paste, crushed tomatoes, red and brown lentils, and then some frozen veggies as well as some fresh veggies like mushrooms and onions and such. So the specific seasonings or spices I'll be using are oregano, basil, onion powder, garlic powder, minced garlic, thyme, parsley, chili powder, and red pepper flakes. But again, you are free to use whatever you like. There's virtually no way to screw this recipe up. So go ahead and experiment. First, I'll be roasting the frozen veggies since they tend to take a little bit longer than the fresh ones. So I'm putting the broccoli, the cauliflower, and the frozen Brussels sprouts in the Breville at 400 degrees while I chop up the rest of the vegetables. Now, a Breville isn't necessary for roasting the veggies. I just prefer it because it's so much more convenient and it doesn't heat up my whole house on these hot summer days. If you're interested in any of the items I'm using in this recipe, you can check the description box below. I'll link things like the Breville, Smart Oven, as well as the stock pot and Global Yukon chef's knife I'll be using because these are crucial for not only this recipe, but really eating healthy on any level. I actually forgot to chop up the mushrooms and onions and include them from the beginning. I will be inserting them later in this recipe, but had I remembered, this is when I would be chopping them and adding them to the recipe. Mushrooms, onions, and garlic are irreplaceable when it comes to any pasta sauce, and most dishes, most plant-based dishes that you're going to be cooking either on the stove or in the oven, they just provide so much flavor. Most people are really used to getting their flavor from things like salt, oil, and sugar, but when you're eating super clean like this, you are going to want to use those foods to incorporate all those different taste varieties, as well as a ton of nutrition. Next, I'll be throwing the crushed tomatoes as well as the tomato paste into the stock pot. Now, you want to make sure these are no salt added varieties because most canned goods are going to hold a ton of sodium, and that's just not where you want to be getting your sodium from. You want to be getting it from real whole foods. Yes, my daughter is terrifyingly close to that chopping knife. That's just her favorite spot. She loves to see what I'm doing, loves to see what's going on. I just have to start making a habit of putting those knives away. Okay, now I'm going to be turning the water on for the brown lentils and get that going to a boil and turning on the stock pot to get the sauce going. Now, this can cook for several hours, and honestly, the longer it cooks, the more flavorful it's going to be. Today, I'm cooking it for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but feel free to cook it for less if you don't have as much time. It still tastes delicious. And next we'll be adding all of our seasonings. So again, if you want to reference the measurements I'm using, obviously I'm not using measurements. I like to eyeball everything, but I approximate the measurements and add them in the description box as well as the beginning of the video. If you want to go back and take a screenshot, I listed the ingredients of both the main ingredients and the seasonings, as well as the instructions for how to carry out the recipe in the same way that I'm doing it here. After I add all my seasonings, the water is ready to go for the lentils. So I include, I believe, about a cup and a half of these. This is going to be your protein, like your meat substitute if you're used to eating like a regular standard American diet. So be very liberal with these. You really can't overdo it. They don't have much flavor, so just add as much or as little as you'd like, and you know, experiment and adjust for the next time around. After the sauce gets initially heated up, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer for the remaining duration that it cooks on the stove. Now you just want to add your Roma tomatoes, your bell peppers, and the rest of whatever veggies you want to throw into your oven or your Breville and finish roasting. So these will all go in for 40 minutes on top of the, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. I've already had the rest of the frozen veggies in here. Don't ask why I'm using the air fryer basket to roast these veggies. Normally you would just put them in a regular dish that you would even use to put in the oven. I just totally spaced it. There's so much going on when you're trying to produce one of these videos. The camera angles and the lighting and the audio, and there's just a lot to keep in mind, and I went with the basket. I also ended up using a second can of these crushed tomatoes. I like to batch cook everything, so obviously this is a big production. When you make a big meal of any kind, it's going to take a lot of forethought, a lot of gathering, a lot of chopping, a lot of cooking. So why not think smarter, not harder, and just do it all at once and make as much as you can and freeze some and eat some throughout the week. If you haven't tried batch cooking, I highly recommend it. So now we're going to add our red lentils to the pasta sauce, and this will just cook right along with the sauce. These really don't take much to get completely heated through. All right, just checking on these veggies, just moving them around a little bit, making sure they are getting cooked through evenly. You want to make sure to stir everything on your stovetop from time to time to make sure it doesn't burn to the bottom of the pan. And it just keeps things cooking nice and evenly. Okay, so the veggies are done. I'm going to go ahead and add these to the pasta sauce and get all the flavors mixed in together nicely. After you strain your lentils, you can go ahead and add those to the pasta sauce. Since I just realized I forgot to roast the mushrooms, I'm going to go ahead and air fry them real quick. These will cook at about 400 degrees for 5 to 6 minutes. Mushrooms really don't take long to air fry. And I don't recommend air frying mushrooms. Again, I just was trying to speed up the time process. Roasting mushrooms is definitely preferred. You will not only preserve the nutrients better by roasting or even sauteing these, but you will get a lot more by means of flavor. Air frying mushrooms is just not tasty in my opinion. Others might disagree, but that's just how I like to eat them. At this point, you can start boiling your water for your noodles. I tend to use these fusilli organic brown rice noodles. Not only are they delicious and really hold their shape, but they are the most nutritious that I could find. But typically you want to look for whole grain pasta options. Also, I have to buy gluten-free grain products, so that's why these are brown rice pasta instead of wheat. Whole wheat is perfectly fine for those of you who don't have any kind of gluten intolerance or celiac disease like myself. As I mentioned earlier, I also forgot to include the onions in the initial roasting of the veggies. So I'm just going to quickly saute some of these with water. I always saute with water because I don't cook with oil. There are probably 20 different reasons why I don't cook with oil, and if you're interested in learning more about that, I'll link a video here. But basically it's incredibly harmful to your health, and I am all about maintaining my weight, so you can't do that while eating oil unless you have amazing genetics. Sauteing with water instead of oil is actually super easy. There are just a couple things you need to keep in mind. First, you need to continuously be adding the water, and I like to heat my water up in the microwave ahead of time so you're not adding a bunch of cold water to something you're trying to cook. And then you have to be moving it around constantly. You can't walk away and leave it like you can with oil. You have to be moving it around, especially when you're using a pan that's not one of those non-stick like this. This is just a stainless steel pan, so I have to continuously be shuffling the onions back and forth. All right, here's our sauce. It's looking good, just about done. So you want it to be nice and hearty, full of big, thick vegetables. Right before you serve your pasta, you're gonna want to include the greens. These are very delicate. They don't need to cook long. They really don't need to cook at all. Just the heat from the sauce alone is going to heat these up and get them ready to go. Greens are super delicate. You don't want to overcook them because it's really easy to damage their nutrients. You can also use fresh greens. I just prefer frozen because they're less likely to go bad sitting and rotting in my refrigerator if I don't get to eat them in time. You can also experiment with different varieties like kale or collards, spinach, bok choy, cabbage. There are so many different greens you could throw into this recipe, and it really wouldn't change the flavor much, but it definitely does change the nutritional profile. If you're currently trying to lose weight or maintain your weight loss, I do not recommend using this amount of pasta, the noodles themselves. Those are going to be very calorically dense, especially since these are made out of rice flour instead of like the whole grain rice. So you want to pile on the veggies as much as possible and have the pasta be like, the noodles be more like a condiment. This sauce is so delicious, I promise you will not miss the noodles one bit. If you want more whole food plant-based recipes that are supportive of weight loss, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And if you try this recipe, make sure you let me know in the comments below how it turned out, and I will see you guys in the next one.